and welcome to Nature's Wisdom podcast with Lloyd and Danielle Bryant, discussing and exploring life and learning with the biological laws of nature. Today we're going to look at Health is Nothing to Fear, a gentle introduction to German medicine. Today we have a health crisis. So many people are sick and on long-term medication, and symptoms appear to be less responsive to medications and conventional methods. Cancer rates are increasing, and the antiquated treatments appear to do more harm than good. It makes anyone wonder that there has to be a better way. In 2018, I was introduced to a scientific discovery that makes sense of this crisis, explaining why public health is on the decline and making sense of all of these symptoms and issues that apparently come from nowhere. In the early 80s, a German cancer doctor received a cancer diagnosis after tragically losing his son, and this led him to research the cause of his condition. We discovered that our bodies run survival programs just like they would if we lived in the wild, which assist us to cope with traumatic events. These survival programs are triggered by a shock which impacts our brain and signals our body to make some changes so we can cope with the event. For example, we are confronted by a lion, so fearing death, the surface area of our lungs will increase to allow us to absorb more oxygen so we can run away faster or fight for our life. When the threat is over, our body can get back to normal, which it does without us interfering. In our modern day lives, where we do not eat, live, or exist in the natural way we were designed for, this process can be interrupted and we can get stuck in this survival mode. Depending on which part of the story we are stuck in, we will depend whether we are in fight or flight mode, which is highly stressed, anxious, weak appetite, and difficulty sleeping. This is the part where we are experiencing the threat or danger. Rest or digest mode, which is fatigued, achy, low energy, inflammation, various unfavorable symptoms such as recurring pain, weakness, or fever. Or we can chronically switch between the two states. The best way to deal with this is to understand that these survival programs exist and that if there are no medical reasons or explanations for why they started in the first place, such as if you were injured or poisoned or are severely malnourished, then the likelihood is that you have one of these survival programs going on. Similarly, if you have a long-term condition or chronic illness that is basically managed by medication, you are most certainly stuck in a survival program. The doctor who discovered these survival programs called his discoveries the biological laws of nature because he found specific rules set out within these survival programs were applicable to every disease he studied, which was over 40,000 cases, including cancer and terminal illness. His research means that the root cause of disease is the event that caused the shock in the first place, and therefore the healing of the disease is found in averting the threat or danger the body perceives itself to be in, while understanding the concept that the body's natural homeostasis will automatically bring the body back to normalcy. The fact that our bodies possess innate wisdom and are built for survival, not destruction, is not a new concept by any means, and it is the most important aspect of this approach. As the body can, in essence, heal itself, when there is a chronic condition, it means that something is preventing the natural healing process. So then you need to be thinking back to the weeks or months leading up to when symptoms began to find something upsetting that caught you off guard. This is the root cause, and in long-term conditions, it means there is something keeping you stuck in this survival mode, such as reminders of this traumatic shocking event causing relapses. So takeaway points. We have survival mechanisms that run on a subconscious level, meaning we are unaware of them. We can get stuck within these programs and they will run in a loop. The shock aspect of the stressful event that preceded the symptom or condition is the trigger, which is the root cause. understanding what happened and what your body is trying to achieve for your benefit and survival can help the body return to normal. So this is a really, really gentle approach. We haven't used any of the terms that are usually used in German medicine, because what I've done here is try to keep it in the language that people will understand, that they may be sort of familiar with already, you know, the fight or flight, rest and digest, and, you know, just to sort of and explain it from that perception, really.
Yeah, I think that initially you need to introduce people to this subject. I'm assuming that people would view this already have heard of GNM, but you need to use language that's going to be accessible to people to introduce it. And I find that the initial thing is that people maybe don't realize that the shock sometimes. Now, this because there is aspects to the shock. Sometimes the shock can be relatively minor, but it's got a highly isolative aspect to it, which is why something that you might not expect to cause what's called the DHS, the shock moment. It might seem disproportional, but it could be a minor shock, but with a major isolative aspect. It's something totally out of the blue and caught you off guard that can make what would be a small shock manifest into a larger program, which causes then what is understood as disease. So I think that's something that we've kind of learned as we've gone along, that there's a balance between different aspects, and sometimes once you understand that, then you can understand how programs, you know, it's like a different aspects to it, that one could be larger than the other, and then they can still result in a similar program.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
But I think that the other thing that I would like to mention is, like I said before, this article doesn't even touch on any of the words that are usually used in German medicine. So, like, a disease is called a biological program. As you've mentioned, the shocking moment of that event is called, that triggers things off. That creates the spark that ignites the program, if you like. Is called the DHS, the Karma syndrome. Also, it's commonly known as the conflict shock. The theme of that, then, how that was perceived, is often called the conflict or conflict theme. So it's the intention of the article is to reach people who don't know these terms, and looking from the outside in and based on feedback I've received, and, you know, I think it's important to reach people at their level of language. This is really a very, very gentle introduction to people. And people can see, if you start talking in jargon and things like this, you know, it can all seem a little bit, especially the highly suppressed information. I think it can even have like a cultish edge to it, and it can turn people off. So I just really wanted, this is like, I know a lot of people listening to this are probably already on board with it all, and it's extremely gentle, but maybe some of the language that I've used will give sort of ideas on how you can approach people who don't know about it. Just little phrases that can be used. Is that's what the essence of this was, really, you know. And like you say, is like there's we can dig a bit deeper on the like aspects of it, you know. But I know that this article would probably be highly criticized by some of the sort of more well-versed and kind of don't like to think of it as a hierarchy, but, you know, the sort of more purist teachers, if you like, you know, because we're not mentioning, you know, Dr. Hammer by name, not mentioning any of his nomenclature, his language, but that was not the intention of this. You know, that I think that there is a huge place for this it's like bridging the gap between the layman and the science, and that's where I feel that I fit in with this, really.
Yeah,
But we both do.
yeah, I mean, it's a delicate balance to make it accessible without, you know, bombarding, and but then you don't want to do a disservice to it. So, you know, we both, as Danielle write articles, she'll obviously check with me that the, you know, the language is, I think, accessible, but obviously because we're both kind of well versed with the language, it's an exercise in trying to simplify, but without doing a disservice or anything. So there's gonna be some sacrifices or compromises, I should say, when you go through this process. But obviously, there's a lot more content that Danielle has produced, including the books that you know, build in toward a more using the word in the nomenclature, she says, and the concepts, you know, trying to keep them as faithful and accurate, but still always on the side of making it accessible. So
and it's not meant to end here, you know, it's this article is not meant to be you know, this is what it is. And I think this is where sort of the people who would criticize this need to realize that it's not diluting it, because it's not a standalone, it's a stepping stone.
yeah, you've got a certain set of people who would know very little about the subject or just add some sort of introduction. You've got to have content available that makes it accessible to those people with just enough that they want to learn more. Because at the end of the day, no matter how hard you try, you cannot condense it into, you know, something that you can present in a few minutes. It takes hours and hours to be able to actually grasp the basic concepts, and then from there your knowledge and your understanding will grow. So you just need to have content out there which is going to, you know, some people are going to be able to, okay, well, I like the idea and I want to research more, and then we can start getting a little bit more scientific, start jumping into the laws that's going to stand under their own scrutiny. But if you start going in there too much too quickly, it's just going to be overwhelming. And in particular, if someone has got something going on, I mean, it's always said that you learn the subject when you're healthy. But I mean, more often than not, someone's got something going on.
And that's what's caused them to find it.
Which is why they wanted to look.
Just say, no, sorry, we're not going to help you. You don't know enough. That's, you know, we're not going to turn people away. So we're trying to make it more gentle and accessible for the people with something going on as well.
Yeah, so it is a fine line, and there will be compromises, and we aren't going to please everyone. But you know, we are fully.
We just need to do it our way, haven't we?
Yeah, we're hoping, you know, we've had a lot of good feedback, so we're hoping that doing the content in this way, and Danielle's careful balance of the wording has got scope for people from the very beginner, someone very new to the subject, or even at, you know, a very first introduction to it, that up until let's say an intermediate level where, you know, we dig into a lot of the specifics and, you know, challenges, and, you know, I've wider discussions with them. So yeah, so well, hopefully we're honoring, I mean, everything we want to do wants to honor the science and the Dr. Hammer ultimately, because he, you know, sacrificed his career, and you know, we feel that he was inspired, absolutely, and this is a gift for everyone. And so any small thing we can do to make it accessible to people, then now's the time.
And the other thing that I just wanted as well, you know, to touch on, which is kind of probably opening up a topic for another discussion, another sort of episode, is that the majority of people that I have reached and talked to is through my therapies. And there's a lot of criticism in the GNM world, if you like. people who practice therapies, but you know, like sort of even to the point of calling every therapist a charlatan, and that, you know, the body heals itself, so you don't need a therapist. And but had I given up my therapies and only focused on this, then probably only a tiny fraction of people that I've reached would have heard of it, because it's through the therapies that I introduce this to people. And it's not about just totally dismissing everything and not doing things. It's about doing things on this new and based upon this new understanding. Everything I do is based on this foundation. So a lot of the things that I do change. The sort of the way that I work has changed. The way that I converse with clients has changed. You know, they each have homework to go and do, and yeah, I think that people who criticize therapists and throwing the baby out with the bathwater, really. Of course, there are people who could take advantage, you know, and just want to try and make money off it. You know, I'm not saying, but to throw all therapists out like that, I think is a shame, really, because it, you know, I actually would like to encourage people who are practicing therapies and you know, teaching other sort of, you know, maybe yoga teachers, somatic teachers, that sort of thing, to encourage those people to learn this and practice their therapy based on the laws, and be able to spread the knowledge through to their clients the same way I have. I think that is I think that's really valuable.
I think the criticism of therapists in general come from Dr. Hammer himself, and it's simply because he had people claiming their version of the therapies, which was a modified version of his laws, his discoveries, that then they passed off as their own, without even acknowledging him. And in doing so, you know, when they modified it in some way, it didn't get the right balance of the laws and what is required. So and obviously just by literally ripping off his work and not acknowledging, plagiarizing his work, then that's not an honourable thing to do anyway. So obviously that would have hit him as well. But you know, so obviously he was stung very hard by trying to be open, putting his work out there and his research out there for others. And so he's obviously going to be very defensive. So I think he used the word therapists as more of a blanket term for people who were basically taking his work or trying to integrate it with existing therapies, just as something that could sit alongside, that they could dip into when they want to. And what Danielle always acknowledges is that because these are biological laws, you need to really understand everything that you thought you knew beforehand with this as the foundation. And then some things, like Danielle's mentioned, a couple will happily complementary, they're complementary, and they will sit alongside or on top of these as the foundational laws. But when you just try to cherry pick bits that you want, and then something that you maybe, for example, if you someone who was selling supplements and they didn't want to stop selling supplements, so that part of it, they might still be flogging their supplements and just cherry picking bits that they want to, which complements what they're doing,
or just passing off as another theory or whatever.
Yeah.
I think, you know, there's a couple of big names who do that.
So it's justified, and it's completely understandable why Dr. Hammer would have had issue with therapists. But I think the distinction is someone like Danielle, who is doing it in a completely different way, trying to honor everything Dr. Hammer does, trying to reference where possible his sources, and him as a source, whether it be in his books or work that he's then endorsed. So it's a completely different animal of that, what Danielle's trying to do as an existing therapist who's completely rethought her entire practice and uses the laws as the foundation, to what I think Dr. Hammer was fighting against, whose therapists were trying to rip off his work without any acknowledgement and basically changing key aspects of it, which then completely went against the principles because he lived it. Early days, he might have gone in one direction and then he realized why you don't resolve everything. Going into a bit more advanced now, but there's certain lessons he learned along the way before he fully formulated his laws and then further refined the all his research around them. So he went through certain processes, realized some things couldn't be shortcut, or realized that some things are purposeful. And so people who then come from an old mindset there and they've had success with certain things before, they're very reluctant to let go of those successes. But if you re-understand those successes from the biological laws perspective, from the GNM perspective, it doesn't negate them. It's just, was it getting rid of symptoms? Was it just hiding or masking something that, or was it just the timing of it that, because of the nature of the laws, letting the programs fully go through, would have resolved by themselves anyway. So it's re-understanding those things of what actually happened from the laws, and then, like I say, going forward with that, with them as a foundation, is what Danielle has done. So I think it's completely different to what Dr. Hammer was fighting. So,
and I think what you touched on then, looking back and thinking, holding on to successes. Well, I can think of three actually. The biggest one actually, that it was just came in as an afterthought as the third one, was my book. Because I had the second edition of my book, Holistic Wellbeing, which was is there on the shelf. I don't know if it's wrong about it, but that had only been over this side.
This one.
Yeah. So that's the second edition of my book, and I can't remember the date that I released that. It had only actually been
That'll be about 2017.
Yeah, and it was like a year later or something like that. It wasn't that far, and then I learned GNM, and I thought, my goodness, everything in there is wrong. And so I had to rewrite my book, and create a third edition, which was not in my plans. Now, I think a lot of it is letting go of the. It was quite a challenge. That was. It was kind of, there was a lot of when I was learning and realizing how wrong, I suppose, I'd got everything, and that I'd written a book about it and everything, and there was quite a lot of resistance, I think, and it was very overwhelming when I was learning, because I knew deep down that this was right. I knew that it was right. I just plowed through all of that. But I can see easily how somebody would maybe think, oh well, a bit of ego might come in or whatever, and think, oh well, I know this, I've done this, that's completely opposite. Well, that, and then just be dismissive of it. It's quite character building, I think, when you've learned and especially written a book about things, and then you have to completely do a U-turn and change your mind on everything. And I already had a little bit of a following from the book, and from the shop and that, and we've changed the stuff that we've done and the things that we offer in the shop as well. But yeah, I mean, we did like a big cancer event based on the truth about cancer. So it was just I was already sort of there in the kind of public speaking, giving talks on my cancer journey and based on the truth about cancer stuff and everything. then to turn around and say, oh, right, I got this wrong. Guess what? This is this other thing that's told me I was wrong. It was a huge thing. And I can understand that people might not be that willing to do that, you know.
In fact,
But the other two things, anyway, that was the third. Sorry, go on. But leaving it.
well, in fact, the book thing is kind of forced you to do that, though. So maybe it really, not everyone had written a book that they had to revise. So you didn't want that out there. So you kind of forced yourself to go through, revise everything. And in doing so, you actually were checking, yeah, you know, this does work. This still does work. Or
this
okay, I'm happy to let that go.
Yeah.
I understand what the appeal or, you know, what the thing was with it, but
it was a process.
so it's actually a useful process, which may be almost like accelerated.
And I couldn't bring myself to be still selling a book that I knew deep down, I knew in my heart was giving the wrong information and leading people along the wrong path. You know, fighting disease, staying in the fear of things, you know, being fearful of everything, which is what alternative medicine makes you, fearful of everything. So with the second thing I was going to say was the breast lump that I had, and I was giving talks on how I had used kinesiology and supplements and ketogenic diet and that to get rid of this lump, and using thermography to measure the progress and what have you. And then I look back on that and I think I didn't really do anything. It would have sorted itself out whether I helped it or not. But thankful that I used muscle testing, because that meant that whatever I was doing, my body, you know, it was not going to interfere with the process, because basically muscle testing will sort of, it's like asking your body what it needs, you know, and your body's not going to tell you it needs something that's going to stop it, you know, progressing in a program that it needs to progress in, it needs to heal through. So I wouldn't have really done anything different apart from not be afraid. That would be the big thing. I wouldn't have been afraid. And it was then that I realized how much, even though we felt so empowered by this kind of cancer-free lifestyle that we were leading, that's why it came to as such a big shock that I could have this alone. What, you know, I felt quite powerless as well. And I was thinking, well, you know, we're living on a small holding, we're doing everything right, we're not having chemicals or anything like that, you know, and yet I still got this lump. And I realized how we'd sort of everything was fearful in the alternative health world. We had to fear toxins, we had to fear food that wasn't organic. We had to fear eating the wrong things, even if it was organic. You know, we had to fear all these invisible things around us, and yeah. So when I found the lump, I realized that I was so much in the fear, because then I also felt powerless, because, you know, but that wouldn't have happened if I'd have known that back then, obviously. But the things I would have done, I still would have done the muscle testing to see if I could help the process along, maybe, you know, I think I would have still done all that.
I mean, in fairness, I think that, you know, with the event that we did about the truth about cancer, our thing was about taking the fear away. We knew that fear was a weapon. And I remember the post that we created for the event was to take away the fear, because we knew then, long before knowing GNM, we knew that fear was the worst thing, the huge thing.
Even though we were in the fear ourselves, I mean, it took finding the lump to realise that how much.
We thought we were getting rid of the fear, but actually it was just.
It was almost like a false empowerment, wasn't it?
Yeah. So what I'm saying is the sentiment was right, even though we hadn't kind of struck gold at that point. But we were at least, let's just say, heading in the right direction, which is away from, you know, the conventional, let's say.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can go so far in that direction and it'll actually lead you further away, as Danielle says. So, you know, but obviously with GNM we struck gold, and it
It's really
stood the test of
liberating,
time.
isn't it? It's so liberating because there was all this stuff that we were fearful of, you know. We wouldn't eat in certain places or certain things, or put certain things on our skin and all of this. I mean, we're still sort of fairly careful because obviously there's the poison issue and what have you, and we do believe we're natural beings and we should be sort of just having natural things, you know, that's what we're designed for, we're created to have, you know, but we're not fearful of the other things anymore. I mean, I used to be so afraid of sugar, you know, I was so afraid of sugar. But anyway, I can't remember what the third thing was now.
Well, I was just going to say that it's amazing it took us, because by then we'd been running our natural health shop for like about 14 years before we discovered GNM.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's amazing that it took that long for us to discover it. So, and it is still suppressed now. It's taken off a lot in the last few years, but it is still, it needs to be out there more. So this is what we're doing.
I think that the terrain theory has been shoehorned in to distract people away as well, I think. You know,
That was the third thing, yeah.
I can't remember the third thing, but it was on the lines of, it was along the lines of the breast lump and realizing that I hadn't really done anything, you know, that it would have healed by itself anyway. So there was the, you know, I was so sort of chuffed, if you like, that I had cured my own cancer. But hadn't really, because my body was going to do it anyway. And I think that people hang on to that. No, well, I used this and it worked. So I suppose my need to know the truth and to know why the lump disappeared, you know, was stronger than my need to think that I cured anything.
You want the truth of it, no matter what. You don't, just being satisfied and living in ignorance isn't really the option, is it?
No.
We do need to know, because you just need that to understand for the future and for anything else. You know, you're that type of person.
Yeah. Even if it does ruffle my feathers to start with. I soon realised that, yeah, well, there's a few things that we've misunderstood along the way, and then that's kind of like ruffled our feathers a bit, and I've been a bit defensive about, and then I thought, hang on a sec, you know, and it's, you know, the truth is important here, and maybe I've understood things a bit, you know, incorrectly or whatever. And I always say that whatever I do and however I teach, and whatever information I share is always at my current level of understanding, and I'm always open to sort of being corrected. There are a few things that people have tried to correct me on, and yet shall we say, there's aspects of it that has not been, I haven't been convinced. I do need to be convinced, you know, when I know things and I've learned things and experienced things, and you know, I'm not sort of just gonna be I don't change my mind easily, but I will. I think that's what I'm trying to say. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think that, you know, we need to follow what resonates, because, and I don't go in for all this is my truth, and all this. The truth is the truth. The truth is the truth. That is the thing. Yeah. But how people get there is different.
Yeah, I think where the my truth thing has got some validity is we've
This is
got our
where
own
we're at,
perception.
isn't
We've
it?
got our own perception of
Yeah.
things, which is a big thing in GNM anyway. Everyone's got their own perception of things. So we're not disqualifying that. but when it comes to certain things, there are, whether it's like, laws of nature, laws of physics, there is just one truth, really, there is a truth. And GNM taps into that. So
And
it's not discounting people's different viewpoints and perceptions of things, because things can resonate for them or not resonate with them. So we just don't want to mix that up, because there's still the scope for that. I just want to say,
yeah,
some people could see that as something as being dismissive, and it's not meant to be. It's just we're understanding when you're talking about things which require specific truths, and then other things which are a little bit more fluid and down to interpretation and what resonates with you, that is your truth. So, there's a distinction between what's kind of like tangible and what's maybe esoteric or something. So, we don't want to be putting people off at this stage. We want to be encouraging them to want to know more. So it's just even now, just like getting the language right, that
But then this is also relevant for people who are well versed and along their journey with GNM, to sort of understand where they're at in their journey, and others that they may be sharing it with, as well.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, hopefully the discussion is relevant for others, not just absolute things.
Yeah, well, hopefully people will tune into the things that they resonate with and want to find out more, rather than, oh, there's one particular thing I don't like the way you said that, and then lose interest. Please don't do that.
And yeah, this is important, because there will be things that you don't want to hear if you're new to this. There will be things that don't resonate at the start, because you need a deeper understanding for them to be able to resonate. So and be accepted. Sometimes you need to sort of just put those things on the shelf and keep good moving forward, because those things will soon be able to be taken off the shelf and understood in a different way.
It is a
and maybe some as well, sometimes, especially with things that are completely opposite to the beliefs that we've been brought up with, they can be really hard to hear. And sometimes you need to hear them from several different points of view before they sort of you can become open to them. So
we gave it a muscle testing workshop a couple of months ago, which complements GNM quite well, and a couple of people there. I think you did a brief explanation of GNM, how it, from the kinesiology muscle testing perspective, and a couple of people said, "Oh, that little aspect, I didn't get it before, but I get it now." And yet the explanation given was briefer than maybe one of our presentations, which is more like a couple of hours, and yet it just hit the right aspect that they were able to tune into it better. Obviously a lot of people, they need, there's not one size fits all, which is why there's so much content out there, so many different people trying to get the word out in different formats, and they will work differently. So
everyone is as valid as the other.
Yeah.
I mean, I listen to others, and I think, well, I wouldn't have said it that way, but somebody else might have needed that perspective. So I think that everybody is valid. The more people sharing this in their own way, the better. Because even if things are not quite so accurate in how Dr. Hammer really sort of wanted it to be shared, if that is cracking the shell and enabling somebody to lose their fear and have that paradigm shift that they need, then they'll find the right way. It's just the initial breaking through, really, that is important. And if the message has to be somewhat diluted in order to get that, to open that door,
I think it's where we attempt to if we feel that we're diluting and we have to make a compromise on something, we'd rather say that and be upfront. Whereas some people will maybe oversimplify in a way that, you know, and they're not saying, they're not pointing that out. I mean, that's, again, you know, people got their own way of saying things, but that's our way, is to try to say, okay, this might not be like strictly, but the concept, the idea is to get the concept across that people will absorb it better. So hopefully, you know, we're always trying to be honourable and respectful, and we endeavour to, let's say, do that where we can. So, I mean, if we fail in that respect, then let us know.
I still can't remember what the third thing was.
Okay,
And
maybe that's for another time then.
maybe it is, yeah. But the one thing I did want to sort of mention as well is, because you said about selling supplements, and obviously we do have a shop that sells supplements and various natural health products. But we've kind of overhauled it, haven't we, to sort of, we don't really sort of, we've reduced things so much. We've tried to bring our website in line with explaining the little bits from the GNM standpoint, where we can, because obviously there's trading standards and all things like that we have to consider. But so it's kind of like trying to sort of, you know, well, if you like using essential oils, then maybe bear in mind this, you know, if you're in a biological program or whatever, you know. So we've got little bits and pieces like that on the website. But we've kind of stopped doing and promoting things that are against the biological laws, really.
I mean, there is, I will say, there would be some wording remaining, simply because there's approved EU health claims. So this is things you're allowed to say on a product label or on a description of a product, and they're EU approved, so everyone can use those. So we might repeat some of that, even though strictly true.
So usually put a little note on the product there, like say things that are good for the immune system, and we'll say,
but so, you know, what we can't do is replace them with our version of how we would interpret those things from a GNM perspective.
Because it becomes
yeah, so maybe with just a little side note, then we might put a little something, you know, that complements that. But it is a difficult balance.
We've done our best.
Yeah, but certainly selling products which fight disease, for example, that, you know, it's not something we'd entertain anymore. If there is something favourite,
it hasn't been very good for our business anyway, because like people will ring up for, oh, what have you got that's good for this, and then, well,
where do you start?
Where do you start? For a start, but yeah, we try and sort of introduce things, and so really there's not really that much there is good for that sort of conditions. So it's not very good for business, actually. I think that I was thinking of something along those lines for the third thing, but that we've had to change our business and the way we do business as well, you know. And you know, thinking of the big names that still flog a lot of supplements, and they do know about GNM, and yet it's just like in there, you know, oh, this is a theory or whatever. Well, this is an interesting idea. Oh, but buy these supplements because they're good for this, you know, and that's totally not what we're about.
I actually think COVID, Novid, or scandemic, or whatever you want to call it, kind of showed that, because some people saw it as an opportunity to flog supplements, but just different supplements of a different kind, and protocols and things. And so the people who try to learn about, now some of it might be genuinely intended, but
we probably missed a buck there. You know, we could have put together a COVID pack or something out of products that we were selling.
yeah, but I think that, you know, some people saw that as an opportunity.
Yeah.
And
that just proves that that's not what we're about, is it? Because that's what we would have done.
yeah, anyway. So covered everything. Is there anything else you wanted to pick up on?
I don't think so. Just yeah, I mean, everything you need to if anybody is new and listening to this and you want to find out more, everything that you need, including links to external places, is on my website, danielleandbryant.com.
Okay, this is our first go in this format. So obviously let us know what you think. And if when we view it, you think it's worked well, then hopefully there'll be more.
Yeah, and if you want to see a text version of the article, that's on my website too. Which is calls what the title I called it at the start. The gentle introduction to GNM. Yeah. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening, stroke watching.
Bye bye for now. See you soon.